Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Victoria Bedford and I'm a holistic spiritual therapist working to help empower people to understand the impact of healing and recognizing the impact of the things that they have been through in their life and how this has led them to become who they are. And in part that is due to my own journey of the things that I have been through in my life, of the traumas and abuse that I've been through in my life, and how that hugely impacted me as a young adult and an older adult, and really kept me stuck in some self-sabotaging behaviours, in some really traumatizing behaviours, and also in deep depression. So in this video I'm going to be speaking about something that I've recognised in myself actually, and it's been this epiphany, if you want to call it. So I have been working to help empower people by talking about abuse for about 2 years after a 10-year journey that I have been through of healing. And I have noticed myself skipping around this word abuse. I have noticed myself almost not being as direct about the word abuse, is speaking about it but saying, well, this could have happened and well, that could have happened, and almost being a little bit murky about it as if I shouldn't be talking about it. And I recognised how uncomfortable I was speaking about abuse, and I put it down to the fact that when you're talking about these things, it's very delicate for people. Some people don't know how to connect to it, and while that is all true, I've had a really big epiphany. And it just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you are in your healing journey, it doesn't matter who you are as a teacher, that these epiphanies can come at any time. And that just by continuing to do some self-reflection is when these epiphanies happen. So obviously my work has gone from mediumship and tarot reading to help people heal and grow, to now being a spiritual teacher, where I am teaching people all the behaviours they have from abuse in childhood, all the ways and things that are signs of abuse, and how to change that so they don't abuse people around them, and also so that they can become happier. And I noticed myself being really uncomfortable with it, like knowing I needed to do this because as a child who was abused, I was a really unhealthy adult. But I'm now realising I spent so many years denying I was abused. Not even denying, knowing. Not even knowing I was abused. Like, my childhood was so normal because it's all I knew. I didn't know anyone else's childhood really because I was an isolated child because of what I was going through. So I never really had anything to compare it to. So I disconnected a lot from a lot of the things that I was put through to try and find a way to love my parents, because as children, ultimately, we are conditioned to want to find ways to love our parents. That's how it happens. They've been given birth to us, they created us. All children have a conditioning in them to love their parents, irrelevant of what they've done. And disconnecting from what they've done, even though you know what they've done is painful, and you know what they've done is hurtful, you're in conflict. And for many years I was told to never speak about anything. I was always made to feel like this is things you do not speak about. Every time I went to my parents about how sad or depressed I was shut down. I was told to shut up. It wasn't like that. You're wrong. You're viewing it wrong. Everyone gets hit. Everyone, you weren't sexually abused. You weren't. And I was gaslit so much as a child that in my early adolescence I disconnected from it. And I tried to form loving bonds with my parents. But obviously I couldn't, because I didn't feel safe around them and I didn't know why. which meant I constantly reacted to them and was angry with them or pulled away from them or just didn't like being in their energy or just their digs, and I just didn't know why. And it wasn't until I had a breakdown did I start to really connect to all the things that they'd done, that it was abuse. And I was about 30 when I finally realised as a child I was abused. I would never have said that before my 30s. Never. I would have always believed they tried their best. And through my healing, I've learned that unhealed people hurt people. And it's led me to form some compassion and awareness for them, because I've had to let go of the control that they had over me, over the pain. But I think because I was in denial for so long, and because abuse was labelled such a dirty word, I've been scared to be outright about how abuse affects people, especially because I didn't know what abuse was. So I almost don't want to limit people by telling them they were abused before they're ready to face that they were abused. But I'm recognising that I'm trying to please so many people, and I'm trying to worry about so many people's thoughts, feelings. And this work, we do have to worry about other people's thoughts and feelings. But if I'm here to do the work, I have to be honest with the fact of what abuse is. And that I am here to help people who have been abused. And that doesn't mean you have to hate your parent, because in future videos, and I feel all uncomfortable now, I feel like I shouldn't be talking about this. Like, this is a taboo subject, and that comes from deep conditioning of what I was speaking about was wrong. And this is why I believe so many people will struggle to connect to the word abuse, because they have been deeply conditioned to believe that word is wrong. They have been deeply conditioned to disconnect from all the things that that parent has done. Now, I do want to say to you, there is definitely two levels of this stuff. There's parents who were just really abusive, were passing down such unhealthy behaviours, knew what, it's clear to see what you're doing is abusive when you're shouting and screaming all the time and hitting all the time and sexually touching. That's going to be clear to any individual human to know that that's abuse. And there's lots of parents that are like that. But there's also other parents that had behaviours that they didn't know were unhealthy, that they didn't know were abusive, but they did them because they were conditioned to do them. And later in life, they just don't know how to connect to that, because they feel this deep innate shame for the fact that they did those things. And it doesn't make them hugely bad people, unless they're still carrying on the abuse in adulthood. But there is a lot of adults that do change in adulthood, that do recognise some of their behaviours. They don't always know how to say sorry, and they don't always know how to say, look, what I did was wrong. But they mellow and they change because they want to build a different bond with you, knowing more than what they knew back then. But us connecting to the fact that we were abused is, I think, really important, because if we don't recognise that it wasn't that we were necessarily actively abused, like the person knew exactly what they were doing when there was abuse, but just accepting that actually the actions were abusive. The person may not have meant to do them, but the actions were abusive. And when we connect to the fact that the actions were abusive, we can start to recognise that we do need to heal from that. Because if we deny that actions were abusive, we are denying a huge chunk of what happened to us, and we are denying the potential for the recognition of what we need to heal. And if, like me, you have been conditioned to not talk about certain things, you have been conditioned to keep quiet or to not face certain things, you will not know how to heal or want to heal, because you'll be scared to attribute it to abuse. Because we do have this one stereotypical view of what abuse is. Abuse has to be full on beating. Abuse has to be full on sexual abuse. That's just not true. Abusive actions are actually quite a lot smaller than that. Abusive actions can be a parent who does hit you all the time because that's all they've known. A parent who, the reason why it is abusive is because it's taught you to suppress anger, or it's taught you not to know how to deal with anger. Somebody who ignores your needs, a parent who just tells you shut up all the time, go away, or I don't want to hear it. That's abusive action because it's denying the need for a child to be heard. But we have a lot of older generations say, oh, abuse, disgusting, you don't know what abuse is. If you would know if you was abused. Well, we do. Abuse in my day wasn't like that. Because there's a mass generation, and you might be one of them. You might not want to also realise that you potentially have had abusive actions to your children because of what you've been through. And I'm not here to shame anybody, because there's been abusive actions on my part as a parent, as a partner, as a friend, because I didn't know any healthy ways of dealing with things. But that came from the fact I denied my own. And this is how ancestral trauma gets passed down. Because the more we deny what affected us, the more we impact it on others. And the more they get taught to deny what's affected them, the more they impact it on others. And the only way we're ever going to heal is we're going to understand that there has been a lot of abuse in this world. Some of it chosen and some of it unconscious. But either or, as a society, we have to come out of denial. We have to start recognising what actions affected us. And those actions for me as well were silence. I was silenced for so long. And now I'm going to have to try and face the uncomfortable feeling of being a bit more upfront with the fact that abuse is affecting people. Abuse happens from even the most loving of parents, the most well-meaning of parents. And that recognising abuse does not mean a parent is horrible or a parent, we can have two parallels, but it means that some actions were really unhealthy. And when we start to recognise that, I do believe we can actually build deeper relationships with our parents. I haven't been able to, but that does not mean that that's not what we can do. If we understand that our parents' behaviour has come from a wounded place prior, that they have been abused, we can recognise that actually their actions did affect us, and we're going to heal them so that when we are around them, when they slip into some of those behaviours, we can recognise what they are and we can start putting boundaries in. When that parent starts talking about your weight, or starts talking about how you're raising your children, instead of you getting triggered and angry and yelling at them that, well, they don't parent you right, or instead of shutting down and feeling guilt and shame, you can actively put a boundary in of, well, we do parent differently. And I may have turned out very well, but there's some things that affected me as a child that I don't want to replicate with my children. Or it means we can put a healthy boundary in where we don't have or give the same level of energy. We can have to realise that our parents are people we may love, but we can't meet their every need. And we can't, if we don't enjoy spending time with them because there's been a lot of pain and wounding that they're not willing to acknowledge, then we have to enjoy what we can with low expectations of who they are, navigating our way healthily through their behaviour so it doesn't affect our core. Because otherwise, if we don't accept that some of their behaviours were abusive, they will continue to abuse us in adulthood without realising it. And I've seen this with my own parents and why I had to step away. My own parents, my mum, as a child, continually would speak to me about things about my father and adulthood which were way too big for a young child to have to deal with. And I was treated as a therapist. And she wanted that from me as an adult. And even when I was healed, I believed I could help her in some way. the truth of the matter is the bond was too raw, too close, and she wasn't willing to take any accountability. So I was just reliving a childhood wound and a childhood conditioning of trying to be her therapist, or her mentioning my weight, because she was so unhappy about her own weight, and she conditioned me in childhood so much of what I could and couldn't eat and what I should and shouldn't look like, that in adulthood she still had the same power. And no matter how healthy I was, to try and tell her that this is not, we're not here to talk about this, she wouldn't change. So I had to recognise that I had to stop giving her that energy. And I can either love her from afar or not love her from afar. But there's some parents who are willing to take some accountability and accept that how they parented was what they learned, and they realise it wasn't always the most beneficial way to you. And those are the parents that don't always change. They can't always change everything about them, but because you're changing, you can enjoy them and accept them for who they are. And put boundaries in when you need to. And this is why I truly believe accepting that there has been abusive behaviours in our childhood. And abuse is actually things that go against connections. So hitting, shouting, emotionally unregulated parents who scream, who shout, who cry, who shut down, who push kids away. Parents who use children as therapists, parents who divulged relationship problems to the child, parents who were narcissistic, parents who involved the child in parental problems and then made the child the problem when they raised them. A child who wasn't allowed to feel safe with the parent because the parent would shut them down from their emotions, would tell them they were being silly. And if this is consistent, this is abuse. A healthy parent makes mistakes. A healthy parent, of course, is human and says things that isn't always right and goes through their own traumas. But a healthy parent still wants to build connection with their child. A healthy parent wants to, when they can, take responsibility for what they've gone through and include the child in awareness of what they're going through. A healthy childhood, you would have felt loved and connected. And yes, there would have been times your parent was struggling, but you would be able to work through it with that parent because that parent would be open to what their struggles were. Unhealthy parenting, and this doesn't mean they were bad people. This just means they have learned and adopted a set of behaviours that were passed down to them. But we have to come out of denial. And again, I want to stress that every human learns from another human, and that doesn't make them bad people. But every human has the ability to recognise when something isn't right. And if they can't do that, and you're the one that has to heal and rectify their wounds as well as your own, it's important you understand that. And I think I've had a big problem with that. I think I've worried so much because I don't want to label people bad, because people aren't bad, but if you're not going to choose to understand how your really negative behaviours are affecting others, then there's going to be consequences to that, isn't there? And I think we're in a huge era where we don't talk about the word abuse, and we're scared about the word abuse. And I think that's where I am a little bit, where I teeter around, if you've been abused, but it might not be this, and it, parent might not have meant it, and they might have meant well. Abusive actions are abusive actions, and they have severe consequences. And we have to learn to navigate and first come out of denial and admit that we have been through abuse. And I'm going to have to continue to do some self-work to validate the fact that what I'm talking about is very real. Because for a very long time, my parents made me feel like the scum of the earth for talking about the things that I did. They disowned me. They wrote me a letter and told me I should be dead, that I'm dead to them, that they regretted giving birth to me. Now, these aren't the behaviours of a healthy person. And when, you know, I come out about my abuse and my father told everyone I was doolally, and everybody knew my dad had these behaviours in him but didn't want to stand up against him, so they went with him. It was easier for everyone to go against me than it was to go against my father, because my father was the more dominating, and because when I come out about it, I was so emotionally unregulated, I did look doolally, because I was so traumatised from years and years of the things that I went through. My behaviours did look mentally unstable. So everyone was, of course, not going to believe me initially, maybe, because of the unregulated behaviour that I have. But this is the problem in society. People who have been through abuse are very unregulated because they are struggling with the traumas that they have been through. And the people that commit those things that affect those people are quite often more regulated because they have learnt ways to hide their behaviour. They've learnt ways to manipulate people. And there is obviously goodness in them somewhere, but we can't deny the impacts that have on us. And you know, again, if that wasn't your parent and your parent was... We can have hugely hard childhoods and then we can have easier adulthoods with them when we start to at least acknowledge that we need to heal from something. And I'm now, I think, going to work on really connecting to the fact that I am speaking to a certain audience. I am speaking to an audience of people, you know, of people who have been abused, people who have been through abusive situations, and people who've been through trauma. And that I've got to stop trying to water it down to make it palatable for certain people, because the truth of the matter is, if you are somebody that has done these things but you want to heal, then that's completely different. You're somebody that wants to heal. And I don't want to be also, you know, there is a part of me that doesn't want to isolate people, in the sense that I don't want people to feel shame if they have done this. Because there's a difference between people who recognise that they were the abusive parent but they want to change, to the people who want to never admit that they were abusive and want to continue those abusive behaviours in adulthood because that's all they know, or I don't know, their pain is so deep. You can't lead those horses to water and make them drink. But if you are that parent that has, you know, I don't want you to feel shame. I want you to connect to, how do you heal yourself now? Not, you know, even if you have broken relationships with your children now, how do you heal yourself so that you can either repair the relationships with your children or repair the relationship with yourself, so that you can understand how you have been impacted by your stuff. Because even if you can't repair that relationship with your child or your friend or who you want to repair it with, there's a fly in it. Just acknowledging that you went through abuse is really going to help you to start living a life that is more fulfilling. And I think we have to stop teetering around this word abuse. And we have to recognise that abuse has been prevalent in our society, and it has been so normalised that people will not even connect to the word abuse because it feels too dirty for them. But if you want to heal and you want to grow and you want to have a life, you have to recognise how and what you have been through. How and what. You have to recognise how it's impacted you and how it's made you who you are, so that we as a society can start growing and changing those behaviours in ourselves. Even if you're 60 or 70, you could have 20 more years of your life where you feel more connected to people because you're dealing with the abuse that you went through, and you're learning to reconnect to people, you're learning to be vulnerable, you're learning to forgive yourself, you're learning to love who you are, and you're also learning the impact of what you went through. Now, this is not really an educational video. This was a video of self-exploration for myself that I wanted to share with you guys, because we deny so much and we feel so uncomfortable with talking about things that have happened to us because we're scared of what everyone else will think. We're scared of the rejection again of our caregivers. But every time we reject how our experiences have impacted us, we are rejecting a part of ourselves. Every time we deny what has happened to us, we are denying a part of our life and a part of our experiences. And there is only one way we can heal, and that's reconnecting to everything. And that is going to be uncomfortable one way or another. I was a product of abuse, which then in turn led me to abuse myself and abuse at times other people. And I went through great shame and guilt for that. But I have learned to understand where it all comes from so that I can heal. And now I'm having a life that is leading me to be so fulfilled with the people around me and so healthily connected to them that I can make sense of who I was from what I went through. And that's what I want to bring to you guys. Let's make sense and let's connect to the truth of what we have been through. And that often means separating the person from the behaviour. Because when we learn to separate the person from the behaviour, we can see that what the behaviours were is not always who the person is. I send you all so much love on this healing journey. I do say check out some of my other videos. I didn't turn my boiler off this time, so it's been firing up every 5 minutes. I'm sorry if that's off-putting. But check out some of my other videos along my healing journey and the things that I talk about. I've studied psychology quite extensively. I've studied so many things around healing, academically and somatically and spiritual wise, that I'm hoping the things that I talk about bring you a bit of insight. All my love to you.